On January 17, 1997, a man in Lonoke, Arkansas made what he calls one of the greatest mistakes of his life. One minute, he arrives at his family home. The next, his entire family lay dead on the living room floor. 20-year-old Heath Stocks loved his family. To this day, he claims that his mother and sister always supported him. And though he and his father had a tumultuous relationship, he maintains that they did not deserve to die. So, what is it exactly that drove a respectful ex-Boy Scout to murder? This is the story of Heath Stocks, Jack Walls, and the Boy Scouts of America. If you or someone you know is experiencing sexual or physical abuse, please contact the following helpline numbers for support. Lonoke, Arkansas is a quaint town that houses many would describe as the ideal American life. As any small town, the residents were family, and their bonds were tight. Lonoke's residents held their values close to their chests, and the city became a standout moral compass to those around it. Three of the most prevalent aspects of Lonoke were its dutiful church scene, appreciation for sports, and love for the Boy Scouts, thanks to their mantra, respect, honor, and obey. Much like many boys in America, Heath Stocks was a longtime member of the Boy Scouts, eventually reaching the coveted Eagle Scout status. His mother, Barbara, and his sister, Heather, had a tight bond over Stocks throughout childhood. The only wedge in the perfect family life, it seemed, was his father. Heather was definitely his protector. Apparently, he felt very threatened by his daddy, because he wasn't gonna be the perfect child. Heath did kid things and made kid mistakes that were unacceptable to Joe. He had some learning disability. He was ADHD, not getting work done at school. He and his group had a favorite scoutmaster, Charles Jack Walls III. Kind, religious, and doting, the boys under his care were quick to form a strong bond with Walls. Not only was he a respected father, but the Walls name was celebrity in Lonoke, thanks to his family's wealth and his father's work as a Lonoke judge. Everybody wanted to be one of Jack's boys, Stocks himself said in an interview. Anytime that people had problems with their boys, Jack always said that he could put them in the Scouts, and I'll mold them into upstanding young men that you could be proud of. From the very beginning, he set himself apart, seeing things in me my own father couldn't see. The use of the word mold in Stocks' recounting is particularly haunting, considering the aspects of his case. It wasn't just guidance. Jack was a leader, a great influence, a savior, as Stocks' grandmother put it. Now that term drips in painful irony. The people of Lonoke, Arkansas would look at Jack Walls and describe him as magic. He was a perfect citizen, one that encouraged young children to be the best they can be, a role model to all. To most, he was an ideal American citizen, the perfect person to look after their children. Unfortunately, that trust would be broken in one of the most gruesome ways. For many parents of Scouts under Walls' eye, he became a confidant for any at-home conflict. The Scouts would report their worries to Walls, and in turn, their parents would seek advice from him. This allowed Walls to insert himself into the family dynamic of countless people. When their parents were not spending time with the children, Walls was. Sometimes that meant teaching them military fun as they shot guns and hunted. Other times, the topics edged more toward alcohol and pornographic material. Two of his scouts, Doug Hogan and Mark McConnell, reported Walls' misconduct to their family in the summer of 1992. Cletus Hogan, Doug Hogan's father, had Jack Walls resign from the Boy Scouts of America after reporting the incident. When the Scouts turned the case over to the courts, however, Walls used his reputation and power within the Lonoke community to get the charges dismissed, slandering the Hogan's name as people who wanted part of Walls' fortune. Doug Hogan, in turn, became a target to the other boys in the Scouts due to their growing protectiveness of Walls and their new skills in firearms. Heath Stocks was one of the boys groomed by Walls during this time. Behind the scenes, Walls had began sowing dissent between Stocks and his father, which only further placed Walls himself as the father figure in Stocks' life. Joe Stocks, Heath's father, was distant and often physically disciplined Stocks as a child, so Stocks came to his trusted scout leader with his boyhood problems, further entrenching himself into Wall's control. When Stocks' mother, Barbara, discovered Stocks underwent assault by his dance teacher, she insisted Stocks file charges against them. The charges, however, all but disappeared. By the time Stocks entered college, he was to seek Wall's approval for almost everything that he did. Wall's had his grip firmly on the young man Stocks had become, and the turmoil that Stocks experienced would come to a head soon after. Stocks took a weekend home from college, and one horrifying day, Barbara Stocks walked in on Wall's and Stocks together. She never blamed her son, nor did she attempt to interrogate him. She simply went to her pastor to seek advice on the terrifying situation. Stocks inevitably told his mother and sister, Heather, what had been happening to him. This sent Wall's into a frenzy, demanding that the groomed, indoctrinated young man kill the problem. After years of insistence that Jack's protection was of the utmost importance, Stocks heard the order and obeyed. On the evening of January 17, 1997, Stocks went to his family home and ransacked it. His sister walked in with his mouth around the barrel of a .45 caliber handgun. Her mother followed her soon after, and then her father. Seconds later, they were dead. Heath had taken his gun and shot them all. He had killed the problem as ordered. His entire family was dead, and as the courts would soon find it, it was entirely his fault. Even if Walls was there to ensure the deed had been done, it was Stocks that pulled the trigger. I'd go back in the living room, get on my knees, stick my gun in my mouth. About that time, my mom came through, and I see my dad's face. Next thing I know, they're all dead. Stocks fled the scene and disposed of his gun in a nearby river. The other items were put inside a dumpster by a Pizza Hut in town. Stocks sought solace at the apartment of a college friend in Henderson State University, where police would find and arrest him at 6 a.m. the next day. Heath Stocks was charged with 3 counts of capital murder. Investigator Steve Finch, lead on the Stocks family murder investigation, conducted several interviews with Stocks to determine motive for the murders. It was then that Stocks reported the manipulation and abuse of his scoutmaster to the police. It was speculated that Walls was even present during the murders, and yet, when Stocks was put under arrest and served with 3 consecutive life sentences, Walls was not brought under investigation. HeathStocks.info, a web archive displaying the details of the case, said about the investigation, "There was no trial. There was no displaying of evidence, no calling of witnesses, no defense whatsoever." The guilty plea at Jack's command gave little reason or purpose for evidence to be kept or any investigation to ensue. Walls, however, would not remain innocent forever. Eventually, an investigation was put out on Walls, thanks to the bravery of his own nephew, another victim of Walls. Like the other victims, Knox and Walls had a strong relationship. His uncle by marriage, Knox joined the Boy Scouts because of Walls' influence, and due to him wanting Walls as his troop leader, he as well was a part of Stocks' Boy Scout troop. There are many similarities to the young Stocks and Knox, from their upbringing to their own personal difficulties that Walls clutched onto like a parasite. Karen Knox said of her son, "Knox was probably 6 or 7 when Knox joined the Boy Scouts. Knox became a Boy Scout because of Jack. Jack was his uncle. He encouraged it. It was as normal as it could be." When Wade was 5, she went on, being in education, I noticed there was things about Wade that just wasn't on the up and up. He was attention deficit. First of all, he was on medication, and then he was diagnosed with dyslexia. So we knew it was going to be hard. And then, about the 3rd grade, things fell apart at school. Wade could no longer play sports and get along with anybody. He did not respect any authority. I mean, it was just constant turmoil with him. Wade would get so upset that he would run away. He would run, and Jack would smooth everything over, and everything would be just fine. We lived right across the street from Jack. There was always scouts over there. Trouble with authority figures. ADHD and constantly being surrounded by the influence of Walls. All aspects shared between Knox and Stocks that made them prime targets. Knox just had the unfortunate addition of being family. Wade Knox, Walls' nephew, had been abused by his uncle since the age of 7. Reportedly, when his uncle was out washing his car, Knox put a gun to Walls' head and forced him to confess every abuse he had perpetrated to Knox's parents, including that of Heath Stocks and of Knox's own brother. "You go in there, and you tell my mama and my daddy what you been doing to me all these years." Later, traumatized by the things his uncle put upon him, Wade Knox committed suicide. His family started the Wade Knox Children's Advocacy Center in hopes that no other family would have to go through the turmoil they did. In hindsight, many people who view the case of the Stocks family murders speculate that Stocks did not act alone and that the trial was mishandled. Many believe that a guilty plea for Stocks would not have been submitted if proper action had been taken by the investigators. These claims, while having no physical evidence, are supported by the then special prosecutor, Betty Dickey. Due to Walls' influence over the town, the victims' families were not going to file charges and simply allow Walls to admit himself into a mental health facility. This was changed as soon as they heard the details of what Walls had done to their children, and when Walls refused to admit himself. This was when Stocks admitted that Walls had ordered him to kill his parents, and he claimed that Walls was present to see that it was done. Though in later interviews, Stocks claims that he does not remember if anyone else was in the house on the day that he killed his family. Eventually, Walls was charged with 6 counts of sexual assault. He pleaded no contest to the case of Heath Stocks. He now rots in jail with 1 life sentence, with 40 extra years on top. Betty Dickey said about the incident, "We were looking at 50 to 100 young boys over a period of 20 to 30 years that he'd molested." The reason only 6 counts were charged against Walls was due to the statute of limitations. In 2020, Heath Stocks was interviewed by Fox 16 about the murders and the abuse he suffered at Jack Walls' hands. Surprising to many, he did not blame the Boy Scouts for the abuse, despite the recent bankruptcy and sexual abuse scandals that had come out. He did not even blame Walls himself for his parents' death. Stocks claims that he has forgiven Walls, mainly for his own mental health, and that though Walls was not at blame for pulling the trigger, he was the reason Stocks' mind had been warped enough to do something so gruesome. Stocks also puts blame on his parents' insistence of keeping him in the Boy Scouts. Despite several appeals, Stocks remains in prison with a lifetime of incarceration ahead of him. If Stocks had not been subjected to such thorough abuse in his childhood years, his family would still be alive today. Stocks had been a victim of gruesome crimes for years, deteriorating his mental health until he hit rock bottom. 3 of the closest people in his life were dead due to his actions and the abuse of a powerful man. If Jack Walls had not taken the innocence of over 50 young Boy Scouts, so much could have been saved and protected. His nephew, Wade Knox, would also be alive. Justice may have been served when Walls received his lifetime sentence, but there are questions that still remain unanswered. Should Heath Stocks be released from prison? Has he been rehabilitated? And did he deserve his charges in the first place? If you like the way we create these videos and you want to help bring more cases like this to light, hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives. Thank you once again for watching.